So for any basic render, you basically need some stuff to be rendered, like this cube here, and you need a light to be a light source for the object, and you need a camera for there to be a specific viewpoint from which the image is rendered, or essentially taken from 3D and converted to a flat 2D image. Let's build this scene up just a little bit, and what I'm going to do is grab this cube, hit G to grab, hit middle mouse, hold down middle mouse and pull up to constrain it to the Z-axis, then hold Control so it constrains to the grid, and just have it sitting right on top of the grid there. Then I'm going to press Shift A to bring up my add menu, and I'm going to add a plane. I'm going to press S to scale it, then I'm going to hold Control to constrain it to the grid, and just bring it out a little bit of a distance, like this. I'll go ahead and click this cube, hit D to duplicate, press Escape so it goes exactly right back on top of what it was just duplicated over. Then hit G to grab, hold down middle mouse to constrain it to the Z-axis, then hold the Control button to get it to snap so it will sit exactly precisely on top of the first one. Press S to scale this cube, and G to grab, hold middle mouse to bring it down, and just drop it a little bit into the cube. Then I'm going to press Shift and select the bottom cube so that both of these are now selected. And I'm going to hit D, which will duplicate both of them. Press Escape so they hop back exactly to where they were. Press G to grab, hold down middle mouse to constrain it to the Z-axis, bring it up. Click to confirm, press S to scale it down. Press G to grab, hold middle mouse to constrain and bring it down the Z-axis, and drop it in there. And this is just a very simple little couple of boxes. The point of this is so we can have something to render. If you'll notice in my outliner here, and your outliner contains all the objects in the scene. If you'll notice, there are 3 icons by each item in the scene. What these icons are, there's an eye, which the eye represents visibility within this 3D viewport. Like, say I click this very top box, and whatever you have selected in the 3D viewport, you should be able to scroll down and it will be highlighted in white and have a little yellow, like little spotlighty thing over it to indicate that that is selected. And you'll see there's an eye right by it. If I click the eye, then you can no longer see that cube. The cube is still there, it's just not visible in the 3D viewport. But if I click it back, we can now see it. Essentially, the little mouse icon does the same work of locking an object, like if you're familiar with the Adobe suite in Illustrator or Flash or whatever, you can lock different objects or things. But if I click on that same cube and then I click the mouse icon off, and I actually don't have to have any object selected to change anything, but I just did, then now you'll see that no matter how many times we click on this cube, we cannot select it. We can grab other stuff below it, but we can't grab it. So, and then the camera just is the render tab, which is the same as the render button in the properties panel, which we'll be going over in the next video. Say we grab this bottom cube, hold Shift and select the next cube, Shift and the next, Shift and the next, and we press J to join these all together. And now this has become one object, and I'll just go ahead and name this object. You can see what's selected is in white, so I'll double click on that and call it Stack O Boxes, I guess. Hit enter. and it seems to have moved, but that's because the outliner is in alphabetical order. But you'll see we have it in this layer. We can hide things by moving them into other layers. So if I press M, that brings up my Move to Layer window. And if I then click on this second layer, the object that was selected is now moved in that layer. And you can see that by this little dot in the layer I moved it to. So if I click on that layer, then there's my stack O boxes. If I click on the first layer, you'll see there's a dot in it as well because of this plane. If I were to click this plane and press M and then move it to, say, this layer over here, you can see it's now moved. I thought that everything would be gone, but what I forgot was there are some more things in this scene, even though there appears not to be. The 3D cursor there doesn't count as a thing, even though you can see it, nor does the grid. But there is in this scene several things, and some of these things we'll get into later. But the camera, I have the visibility of the camera turned off by default because I normally don't need to move the camera manually. I normally move the camera from looking inside of the camera, if that makes any sense. If I turn the visibility on in the outliner, you can see that it's there, as well as the lamp or light. Lights are called lamps in Blender, as well as other 3D programs. But if I click on the eye for it, you'll see that my lamp, which is my light source, which is really, really high up there, is way up here. I'm actually going to grab that, hit G, well, it's not letting me, oh, that's right, I can't grab it because I have the mouse icon grayed out. So if I click on that, now I can move the light. I press G, I'm going to bring it down by holding the middle mouse. And if you'll notice over here, when I press a button, say F or whatever I do with the mouse, you can follow along with exactly what I'm doing over here. But anyway, I'm going to hit G to bring this lamp down some because it's just a crazy distance high up. But normally I don't, until the last stages of my rendering or my creating or my animation, I don't deal with really the position of the lights and things like that. So I typically keep the light source in my scene not visible and you can't touch it. But with the render tab still not grayed out, that allows it to show up within the actual render. Same as the camera. I usually keep the visibility of the camera off. But let's see, if I go ahead and split this view up into two views by grabbing these little diagonal lines in the corner and dragging it over, and to hop into your camera in Blender, you can hit 0. And so if I turn the visibility back on of the camera, and this is one thing, occasionally your zooming in and out will get a little messed up. And one way to kind of reset that is to hit Shift C. And that also brings your 3D cursor back to the center, but it also helps with moving around. I'm going to scroll my little bar over here so that I can see what's in here. And if you hold Shift on each one of these layers, then that will make visible everything in those layers, holding Shift and selecting them. So you can see my camera here is looking at these objects, and I can move the camera around manually by selecting it and hitting G to grab, and then I can move it exactly on whatever axis I want by constraining it to one of these axes. But typically how I move my camera around is just by moving like I normally do within my viewport. And I'll go ahead and collapse this window back into this window by clicking on the little diagonal lines at the bottom of this window and pulling it over. So now I'm back in my camera view. And you'll notice when I'm zooming out, it's zooming very intensely, like one little click seems to make it go very far away. But if I hit Shift C while while in the camera view, then it kind of resets that zooming and everything. And the way in which I am able to control this camera by using my regular viewport controls, which is just scroll to zoom in and out, holding down middle mouse to rotate, and shift and middle mouse to pan, is that if you hit T to bring up your properties shelf and tool shelf and you go down to view, I have lock camera to view, that's what that says, check marked. And this allows me to navigate through the camera in the same manner in which I navigate through the regular viewport. Like if I hit 1, the number 1 to jump out of the camera and back into the regular view, and then I hold my middle mouse, then I'm, this is how I am getting around in the regular viewport. Also, say you've been modeling in the regular viewport and you find this really fantastic angle that you're like, wow, I really wish I could get the camera exactly there. All you have to do is press Alt-Control-0, and that pops the camera exactly to where the view was. That, combined with having the camera locked to the viewport, allows you to get this view kind of exactly how you want it. So I was talking earlier about the basics of what you need for a basic scene, and that is a light source, which is my Hemi source here. And once you're selected on an object, you'll notice that items within the properties panel, which is, we're going to go over this properties panel in the next video, will change based on the different object you have selected. And in your outliner view, you can select the objects via the outliner view or directly in the 3D view. So like, say if I select my stack of boxes we made earlier, kind of looks like a skyscraper, probably would have been an easier thing to call it. If I select it here and then I scroll down in my outliner view, you see that it's selected. And if I double click to select off of it, it's still white, but the little yellow highlight's not on it anymore. So say I click this plane, you see that that's highlighted. But I can just as easily select anything from the outliner view. So now I have that selected. We have this Hemi light selected, and you'll see if I jump from the plane, with the plane selected, we don't see any icon for the lamp, the Hemi lamp, which is here. But if I click on that, we'll see it pop up here. And under the lamp options, there are 5 different types of lamps that you can create, which all have different effects and shadowing and things like that. And we'll get into that later on. I just want you to know that there's 5 different kind of lights, and you control them within the viewport. I have it, the visibility of it turned off, but you control it within the viewport, and you can scale it and rotate it and move them around just like you can anything else. We've got our basic elements for a scene setup. We've got a lamp, we've got some stuff to render, and we've got camera view to render it out. The only thing left to do is you can either hit F12, and down in here in my UV image editor, the UV image editor is used for texturing and all number of things, but also by default it will send your rendered image to the UV editor. But so if we hit tilde key, that's the little key under the escape key, we can maximize that render window, and we can always be able to see that whenever we need. And for it to go back down, we just hit the tilde key again. And so that is how you set up that's a basic scene, and that's a basic render in Blender. As well as hitting F12, well, let's say I move the camera around a little bit and I want to get a different angle of what I got going on. Also here in the UV image editor, if you scroll with your mouse to move this bottom menu down, or if you want to hit tilde key to maximize everything and so you can see it in full, if you change the slot from 1 to 2, you can make an additional render. So I'll hit the tilde key to minimize that back down, and instead of hitting F12 to render, which is the shortcut, I'll click on the render tab, and under render I'll just hit render, which does the same thing as hitting the F12 button. and I'll hit the tilde key down here in the UV image editor and scroll in to see it. And you'll see now that this has rendered the image in slot 2. And then I can see my other render I did in slot 1. And you have 8 different slots to view different renders, find an angle you like, or whatever. And if you want to save that, all you do is click Image, Save as Image, and this brings up Blender's File menu. And as we talked about earlier about saving all our assets and models and things like that into one folder, and keeping things organized in multiple folders, you can create a bookmark for your Blender items and Blender assets within Blender, so you can be able to click on it and get straight to it just like you would to Documents or Desktop. You just go to the folder that you want, you navigate it through your hard drive or whatever, and then click Add, and it will show up here. So I'm going to hit Escape to get out of this, and that's how you render and save an image for a basic Blender scene.